No one ever warns us that growth would change how people look at you. Not what they say, but how they look at you, how they perceive you. You ever walked into a room that used to feel safe and familiar, and suddenly something felt off? No argument, no fallout, just a shift that you couldn't explain. If people in your life are acting differently around you and you don't know why, this episode is for you. Hi, I'm Dr. Asha. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Real Talk. There's a very specific kind of discomfort that comes with growth. It's subtle, it's quiet, and it's easy to second guess sometimes. You can't point to a fight or a moment when things fell apart. You just feel it in the air. Conversations don't flow the same. People pause before responding. The warmth feels very cautious, like you're very careful about what you say and how you respond. And because nothing obvious has happened, you start questioning yourself instead. For me, it has showed up in the smallest of details. Body language changes. Someone who used to lean forward leans back. Someone who used to mirror my image suddenly felt guarded and distant. Silence stretched way longer than it used to. And I remember thinking, did I say something wrong? Did I miss something? Did I do something? And that's the confusing part. The distance appears before you understand why. And at first, your instinct is to fix it. You replay conversations, you replay the situations, you soften your tone, you offer more reassurance than necessary because familiarity feels safe. And losing that safety can feel like rejection, even when it's not. Growth often looks like distance before it looks like peace. Eventually, something will click. You realize you didn't do anything to cause the shift, you simply stopped playing a role. Every relationship has one: the listener, the fixer, the easy one, the one who keeps things light, the one who solves all the problems, the one who takes care of everything. And without announcing it, you stepped out of that role. Not to make a point, not to create distance. You just became more honest. Honest with yourself, honest with what you wanted. And honesty changes the dynamics. Here's something really important is that growth changes the room before it changes your life. So people feel it in your presence before they understand it intellectually. You pause instead of filling the silence. You choose your words carefully. You feel like you're walking on eggshells. You don't rush to be agreeable. And that shift can make people so uncomfortable. Even if they can't explain why, I know this is something that we have all felt. It's probably very familiar. And we're talking about, what I want to talk about is that what happens really after that shift, not just the realization of it. And if you're navigating around this, this is something that I can definitely understand. And I want to help guide you through this a little bit. I mean, this is where the real work begins because we have a temptation to go back. You feel the urge to return to a version of yourself that made things easier. And sometimes we have those relationships in our lives where we do that. I know for myself, I have some family members, I have some friends, some old friends that I tend to do that. But I have also noticed that over the years that I don't do it as much. I don't try to make things easier. I speak the truth. I'm just authentically being present and going with the moment, going with the flow. But, we'll try to joke or smooth things over or to explain yourself that so that way no one feels uncomfortable. And you could do that. You could be tempted to go back. But going back comes with the cost. You would have to disconnect really from what you know now about yourself and who you are. And that takes way more energy. Once you've tasted alignment in your life, pretending feels exhausting and it feels just not necessary anymore. You feel it in your body. You feel fatigue, you feel tension, you feel like this quiet resentment that you can't ignore. And you realize that being misunderstood for a while is lighter than being misaligned for a lifetime. And I think that that's when growth becomes a non-negotiable. This is where self-trust becomes real too. Not when things feel calm, but when things feel awkward and you stay honest anyway. You stay true to yourself. Some people will adjust to the new you. They really will. I have lifelong friendships, I have lifelong relationships where people have adapted, and likewise, vice versa, I've adapted to their growths and everything, and some won't. And it is hard. There's a grieving process that happens, but this information is valuable for you because when you stop performing, people show you how they relate to the real version of who you are. Not just the role that they're used to, not just the role that you're used to playing. If people are treating you differently, you're not imagining it because when you grow and whenever you have a growth spurt, things change. You didn't suddenly become difficult. You didn't suddenly lose your warmth. You just grew. And there's nothing to be ashamed about that. There's nothing to apologize about that. Growth changes dynamics before it changes relationships. There's another layer that doesn't get talked about enough whenever we're going through changes and you start noticing, yourself changing. It's not just that people start treating you differently. You start treating yourself differently too. You notice that you don't rush to respond anymore. You don't feel the same need to be liked and to be accepted, and you don't explain your pauses. And at first, this can really feel unsettling because you're used to monitoring the room and reading the energy and making adjustments and tweaking this and tweaking that and rereading the email 50 times before you send it because you're just wanting to get the right wording. When that instinct quiets down, you wonder who you are without it. And that's not loss, that's presence. I remember a moment where someone misunderstood me, and the old version of me would have jumped in immediately, clarified myself, smoothed it over, make sure that no one felt awkward. But this time I didn't do that, and I let the silence sit, and man, that was uncomfortable. And it wasn't because I didn't care, but because I trusted that the truth did not need defending in that moment. The silence taught me something very important. Not every misunderstanding requires your energy. You cannot be all things to all people. They may have a version of you in their mind. They may perceive you in a certain way. It may or may not be true. That's okay. Some things resolve themselves when you stop managing them and you step back. Silence feels uncomfortable though at first. It can feel heavy when you're not used to performing it. You might mistake it for disapproval or distance or rejection. But often it's just space for people to adjust, space for dynamics to reset, space for you to breathe. When you don't rush to fill the silence, you give yourself room to respond instead of reacting. And that's growth in real time. If you're struggling with people treating you differently, here's something worth asking yourself right now. Are you missing the people? Or are you missing how things used to feel? Sometimes what we grieve isn't the relationship itself. It's the ease. It's the predictability. It's the version of ourselves that felt accepted without effort. Naming that can bring a lot of clarity. It helps you separate nostalgia from alignment. Alignment with who you are today. Distance isn't always something to fix. Sometimes it's information. It shows you who connects with you through authenticity and who connects with you through familiarity. And it's a variation. You have a variation in your personal and your professional life. Neither it makes someone a villain or neither makes them a hero. But it does tell you where to invest your energy moving forward. And you don't need to chase understanding from people who aren't really curious about you or who you are now. That realization can feel so sobering, but it's also freeing. And there is a grief process. There is a major grief process to let go of things that don't align with you now. Pay attention to who stays steady. The people who don't interrogate your growth. The people that don't ask you to justify your changes. The people that meet you where you are without trying to pull you backward. Those relationships are your anchors. They remind you that connection doesn't require performance or a certain role. There's often a quiet loneliness in this phase that comes right before you expand. Not because you're isolated, but because you're in between. You've outgrown some dynamics. You haven't fully stepped into new ones yet. And that in-between space can feel uncomfortable. But it's also a fertile ground. It's where you learn who you are when no one is pulling at you. No expectations, nothing. And if you're in that space right now, don't rush to fill it. You don't need to immediately replace old connections. You don't need to force new ones. Let yourself be in the pause. Clarity comes when you allow space to do its work. I remember being in a room where I felt the urge to soften myself again, to be more agreeable, to make things lighter, and I caught myself. Not with judgment, but with awareness. And I realized I wasn't being asked to shrink. I was asking myself to. Nobody was asking me to. And that awareness changed everything. I realized that I didn't have to do this. When you feel the urge to go back, ask yourself, am I responding from self trust or from fear of discomfort? That can redirect you and in your entire experience. Some people do adjust. They notice your steadiness, they sense your clarity, they meet you in the new space. And when that happens, those connections deepen in a way that it never could before. Those are the moments that are those quiet wins. They remind you of why staying honest and true to yourself matters. If you're moving through this right now, take this with you. You are not being difficult. You are not losing your warmth, your compassion. You're not pushing people away. You're learning how to be present without performing. You're learning to be authentically you, and that takes courage, takes patience. We're not rushing our growth. We're not apologizing for it. We're just staying true. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who might need it as well. You're not alone in this, and you are growing in the right direction. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to connecting with you next time.